The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for joining us today and a very warm welcome to this webinar, Free Technology and Resources to Enhance and Enable Learning Opportunities for SEND Students. The webinar will be led by Ben Watson, Accessibility Advisor from the University of Kent. My name is Joni Chase and I work for the Kent and Medway Progression Federation, better known as KMPF. Before we go any further or get into the webinar itself, I just wanted to go through a few bits of housekeeping. Firstly, just to confirm that as audience members, you are muted with your webcam switched off, which means we can't hear or see you. And as webinar participants, you will be able to see a toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen. If you click on the red arrow at the top, it will expand the box. Once expanded, you should be able to see a questions box. Please feel free to use this throughout the session if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar. We will try to answer your questions as we go through, but we've also deliberately left 10 or 15 minutes at the end to go through any questions you have as we come to the end of it. This webinar will be recorded, excuse me, and made publicly available for you to watch again, or for you to share with colleagues. A copy of the presentation is also included in the handouts in the toolbar for you to download and have a look at the end of the session. If for any reason you have difficulties, please let myself and Kat Jameson from My Trust know through the contact and questions box, and we will endeavour to rectify it. On that note, I would firstly like to say a big thank you to Kat from My Trust for hosting this webinar. Kat's worked on a project for the last year funded by the Careers and Enterprise Company, which involved delivery of careers advice and guidance in school for SEND students without EHCPs. Part of the project was to create a series of webinars, and today, hopefully you've seen some of the webinars so far, today is the final in the series of the webinars. That being said, My Trust and KMPF are going to continue working together, I'm very pleased to say, next year, and we hope to develop more webinars and opportunities and a conference as well in the spring term. Just to say briefly, for those of you who don't know, that KMPF is a partnership between all the universities, colleges and over 70 schools in Kent and Medway. Collaboratively, we work with young people across colleges and schools to raise aspirations and attainment from backgrounds who may not consider progressing to higher education. The majority of young people that we work with are from underrepresented groups in higher education. And one of those groups are disabled learners. And over the past year, KMPF have formed the Disabled Learner Progression Network, which is bringing together staff and students with the objective of raising awareness and of the progression opportunities available nationally and locally. There is a huge range of support available in higher education, and in time, the Disabled Learner Progression Network aims to bring all of this information together for you to be able to share with your students. The network is still in its infancy, so we would welcome your suggestions about how it could best develop to meet your needs and the needs of your students. So I first met Ben as part of the Disabled Learner Network earlier in the year, and we quickly identified ways we could work together to ensure that university outreach teams adapt their practice to be inclusive for all students. Through our meetings, Ben has certainly helped me to see how as an organisation we need to ensure that everything that we do, from our websites to materials or documents that we create, need to be produced with accessibility in mind. I've also had my eyes open to the vast array of free tools that are available to help students access learning, and some of which I'm really pleased Ben will be able to share with you today. Not all of them, or we would be here all day. So now I have the great pleasure of introducing Ben. Ben has worked in the field of information technology and accessibility for a number of years, and although he's embarrassed for me to say, is a key player in supporting local and national organisations to ensure that they are ready for the accessibility regulations, which are mandatory from September this year. All of this is more pertinent than ever. As a result of COVID-19, I'm sure you're aware that more learning is being delivered online or through blended learning models, and it's making sure that we have these materials right so all students can access it. So anyway, I'm now sure you'll be pleased for me to say, Ben, over to you.
Brilliant.
I'll be back at the end with questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a lovely intro. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of hopefully do two things today. I'm gonna take you through these new regulations and speak to you about why they're important and how your organisation can be approaching them in a really positive way. But also to kind of talk about how by meeting these obligations, it's not just a kind of tick box legal compliance thing. Actually, this is about giving all of our users better access to the information that we provide and allowing them a kind of greater freedom to consume that information in any way that suits them and their lifestyle and the way that they learn best, even if it's a way that they don't currently know that they learn best. So this isn't just about students with inclusive learning plans or recognized disabilities. This is about all of us, and this is about good design. So that's what I'm hoping to take you through. But as Joni mentioned, please stop me at any point if you want clarity on anything, or you want me to show an app again, or something wasn't clear. Okay, so the fundamental things that we're going to cover are these new regulations, practical things that we can do to meet them, and then some resources that will help us to not only meet the regulations better. There are certain things that will help us check for our documents for accessibility, but also the kind of fun side of it, which is, well, how do we then use those more accessibly designed documents to repurpose that content and explore it in ways that perhaps we hadn't considered relevant to us before, or that weren't possible because the technology wasn't there until relatively recently. I'm pretty sure that everything I'm going to show you is completely free and something that you'll be able to get on either your desktop in a standard browser or on a standard mobile device. All right, so all of this should be open to everyone, and all of the links to all of the content that we're going to talk about is embedded in the handout that Kat's made available, and in these slides, and also my contact details are available at the end. So if anybody has any worries about anything that we cover, or wants a bit more information, or wants to catch up about something, then I'm super happy to do that. I really don't want to spook anyone with any of the stuff in here. It's all really positive, and it's stuff that we can absolutely all achieve working together. Okay, so just the first sort of dry legal bit. The regulations are actually called the Public Sector Bodies Website and Mobile Applications Accessibility Regulations 2018. The easiest way to now kind of squash that down into something more reasonable is everybody refers to it as PS bar. Okay, so that's the acronym for it. And what this tries to do is the same that the Disability Discrimination Act did for physical spaces, where it said, everywhere has to have reasonable access, ramps and lifts. It tries to almost do the same for digital environments. Okay, so any digital output that a public sector body produces, so anyone that's more than 50% publicly funded is a public sector body. That includes schools, FE colleges, universities, local councils, parish councils. So pretty much everything that an average citizen would interact with throughout the course of their lives is covered by these regulations. And the way that they're measuring the accessibility of public sector body digital outputs is through something called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which the acronym for that is WCAG. The particular standard that we're on is a version 2.1, and it's then called AA. There are different standards within WCAG 2.1. Single A, which is kind of like minimum compliance, like bronze medal. AA, which is like the silver medal position, that's kind of actually the one that everybody's being told is now the minimum for legal compliance. So WCAG 2.1 AA is the one that we all have to meet. WCAG 2.1 AAA is like going above and beyond. That's the gold standard. So what you may hear in terms of these legislation and me throwing kind of throwaway comments in this is WCAG 2.1 AA. And what that is a series of about 50 criteria that measures digital content. That includes things like color contrast, whether your visual content has alternative text descriptions. So if you put out a handout, for example, a Word document, does it have I don't know, another means of telling people what that graph on page 2 is expressing? Would I be able to access that graph if I couldn't see it? So they're the kind of things that web content accessibility guidelines are measuring. So that's what we're being held to account with. And as you can see at the bottom there, this is websites, virtual learning environments, emails, pretty much any publicly facing content that's required for active day-to-day processes carried out by a public sector body. And as Joni mentioned, the go live date for this is the 23rd of September 2020. So we've got another, whatever it is, a couple of months before this is going live. Now, I mentioned it's a series of about 50 kind of points that WCAG is, but actually you can boil it down into these principles, and the acronym POUR, P-O-U-R, it represents this quite nicely. Okay, so the first thing to think about is, and you can apply this pretty much to any process that you're going through, whether you're designing an assessment for students, whether you're writing some content for some students, preparing a learning experience. You can kind of have this in the back of your mind as a kind of little Jiminy Cricket that says, how would this work if I'm delivering this to somebody who can't see it, who can't hear it, who has limited mobility and may not be able to, you know, interact with the screen fully to manipulate a mouse in you know, a mouse pointer, for example. So these are all the kind of questions that might help you to anticipate some of those requirements. So perceivable is will everybody be able to access your content in a way that is perceivable to them? That, you know, for example, if somebody, you know, we've already mentioned this, if somebody was visually impaired and you have lots of highly visual content, how would we represent it to them? If it's a film you wanted to show, does it have audio descriptions where the visual content is kind of spoken aloud and described, so that nobody is left behind when we, you know, do that part of the lesson and the video is shown, but there's someone visually impaired in the room? How do we bring them on board with us? So is it perceivable? Operable is about the kind of functionality of it. So will the person, you know, has your content been designed in such a way that if I had very limited mobility and I couldn't use a mouse to direct a pointer where I wanted it, but I prefer to use tabs on a keyboard, would I still be able to work my way through the online quiz that had been set for me, or the online assessment, or even the website? Understandable is one primarily about language and plain English. Have we written our content in a way where we explain what our acronyms mean, at least the first time we use them? So again, we're not kind of assuming that people understand some of our kind of technical vocabulary. We're being really, really clear about it, laying it out, and using the plainest possible language that we can use to make ourselves understood. And finally, robust. This is an accessibility thing, but actually this is more about a usability thing. Will it work across a range of devices? Is the thing I'm gonna, you know, make absolutely critical to people completing the assessment, if it's only available on an Android platform, that could be problematic for some people. So have we checked the kind of robustness of our processes to make sure that it works on Mac devices, that it works on people who aren't fortunate enough to have the very latest technology and the latest updates for all of the browsers, for example? So these are some core things to bear in mind, but please remember that accessibility isn't just about the disability kind of support. This is about everything we're talking about here, and we will talk about in this session, will be equally valuable for part-time students, distance students, people for whom English isn't their first language, people who have, you know, time management, you know, other time commitments, people doing study when they've got childcare to arrange and their time's limited and they've got to snatch moments of study when they can. All of the stuff we're talking about here will just generally make your information better and more accessible to everyone. So that's the kind of big selling point of doing this. So people often describe this as this kind of big heading as digital accessibility, and the ultimate goal, remember we're talking about ramps and lifts to information here, is to try and make this as seamless as possible. You know, wouldn't it be lovely if everybody could just turn up to any online session and just engage in it without having to kind of phone it in beforehand and say, you know, well, I'm coming along, can you make these extra adjustments for me? So we want it to be as seamless as possible. And I think we're getting to a point where the technology is making that absolutely possible. But we just need to do the anticipation in the way that we design our content. All right. So it is perfectly possible for people without vision, color perception, hearing, issues with dexterity, cognition, and speech to absolutely get stuck in without any retrospective adjustments if we design our content right. And we've kind of mentioned this, that if we put good stuff in, which is the accessibly designed material, then we can have all sorts of fun with the way that we then repurpose that content. Nothing standing in the way of us manipulating that content and having and reformatting it in all sorts of exciting new ways, not just because of someone with a disability. Now, this is something that I want to just mention. A lot of universities will be employing bits of technology like this. So we have something called Moodle, which is our virtual learning environment, which is where we put all of our learning content, all of our lecture slides, Word documents, lecture recordings, journal articles that we want people to read, electronic books. So it's a real kind of dumping ground, a big repository for all of that learning and teaching content. So clearly the regulations apply to all of that material as well, which is very difficult to look after and manage because you've got so many stakeholders, so many people creating that content. How do we reach them all to make sure they're all being accessible? And what tools like Blackboard Ally do is that they offer a kind of in the natural workflow means of assessing the accessibility of content. So at Kent, when a lecturer or anyone involved in teaching a module uploads some content, they get to see a little icon which looks a bit like a speedometer that tells them exactly how accessible their PowerPoint is, their PDF document is. And if they click on that speedometer icon, they're then taken through to a screen that looks like this, that shows them the document they've uploaded and then an associated accessibility score. And in the particular example we've got on the screen, we've got on the left-hand side a sort of screenshot of a page of text with one of the headings has been highlighted in red, and it looks it's a bit washed out. I've not used a very, you know, a very kind of robust font color, and it's a bit poor in terms of the contrast. So what it's telling me there is that I should clearly make that much darker against the white background, and that would improve the contrast level, and therefore my score would go up and I would get a better score for my overall accessibility. And in this shot here, actually, we've got a few examples of the things that we most typically find using that system across all of our documents are problematic. So you can see there's some issues with contrast, images, so visual content that doesn't have an alternative description, whether that's a caption applied to the image or whether that's actually something that we put into the document when we're creating it as a background bit of metadata. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Or really simple things like documents don't have a title, so it's very difficult to know which document someone's landing on, particularly if you're accessing it non-visually. Issues with heading structure, and I'll speak more about that in a moment, but that's a particularly big issue for visually impaired people. And the final one there does not have a language set, which every document you have the opportunity to set the language, and that will enable a screen reader, which is what a visually impaired person would use to read content aloud to them, that then knows which language to read it out in. If you're a student at Kent, you don't see that speedometer icon that tells you how accessible the document is, but what you do get is the opportunity to download your content in a range of different ways. So what we've got on the screen at the moment is a list of documents, PowerPoints, Word documents, and PDFs. And the person would then get the opportunity to take the original Word document or PDF or whatever it is, and then have it repurposed in a range of different formats. So they could have that back as a HTML document, which is something that works particularly well in a browser, EPUB, which is an electronic book format, so that would work really well on mobile devices, Kindles, that kind of thing. Electronic Braille, which is a really beautiful resource, which I started my life in teacher training, and I used to work at the Royal London Society for the Blind. We had a college in at Seal near Sevenoaks, Dorton House School, and there was a FE college attached to it. And we used to produce Braille the old-fashioned way. And if anyone's ever used Braille, traditional Braille, you'll know it takes up an awful lot of room. So, you know, a single side of standard printed text would be, you know, would involve some huge kind of Braille sheets. And if you wanted then to have something like, you know, a Dickens novel in Braille, you'd need a wheelbarrow to carry the thing around. Well, electronic Braille is a lovely modern invention which gives you a small kind of device that presses out pins electronically. It pushes out these little kind of pins that you then feel, the little bumps to read the Braille. And when you finish that sentence, it then refreshes and gives you the next sentence. So highly portable and really cheap and easy and quick to produce. And this system will automatically offer that with at no extra cost to the institution or in terms of time. And the final output option that's offered to people is a mobile audio format, MP3, which is where something that your mobile phone would be able to accommodate. And that then means that I could listen to these documents while I'm cycling into university in the morning, or I'm dropping the kids off at school and I've got it on the radio in the car, you know, that I could then listen to my journal article, my committee minutes being read. So what we're talking about here is different ways of accessing standard content, but we're sort of unlocking its potential. And the more accessibly we create that content by following some of those basic principles of, you know, describing visual content with alternative text, etc., it allows that information to really sing, and it means that there's no further barriers in how people wish to use it. Okay, so that's why it's worth making the little bit of investment. Takes a little bit longer to design something accessibly at source, but once you've done it, it's future proofed, and anybody who wants to come and use it can use it without then having to come back to you and saying, what is this, you know, what is this slide, the image on slide 2, what is it? I can't see it, can you give me a bit more information? That information goes and everybody can just get on with it. Now, the particular thing I just mentioned was something that the University of Kent actually does pay for, but I want to show you that there are ways to achieve all of that using free resources. Now, the first thing, to help you reformat almost any document into almost any other format completely for free, is something called RoboBraille. This is absolutely beautiful, this system. Okay, so it's a browser-based thing, and it will allow you to take any document format, for example a Word document. Let me do one here, so hopefully you can see me doing this. So I'm going to choose a file format. In fact, we'll do the slides for this session. So I'm going to upload these. So completely free to do this. You can do this on any device. Oh, I shouldn't have picked that because it's quite a big file size. Give it a moment. Perhaps I'll pick a smaller file. Oh, any of these small. We'll try that. Oh no! Oh, sorry. It was me. I'm being ridiculous. It's gone and done it in the time anyway. Okay. So now my original PowerPoint file that I uploaded, it's worked, and it's now letting me have that in a range of different output options. So I could then say I want that as a much more accessible HTML version. But many options for smaller documents, for Word documents, PDF documents that are primarily text, it will give you the opportunity to have that as MP3 as well. So all I would then do is put in my email address down here, and it will, by magic, send me a link to where I download that more accessible alternative. So that's doing very much like Blackboard Ally, but you could do that for any document you want. So for any of your students who are, I don't know, maybe they struggle with the weight of reading that they have to get through, running it through a service like this could be really helpful to them, because they could take that troublesome chapter of a book, that journal article they've got to read, and absolutely convert it to a mobile audio format that they could then listen to while they're out for a run in the evening. You know, if that's the way they learn best, why not? There's no reason not to. And it doesn't have to be only because they've got a visual impairment. So even though this is called Robo Braille, which has, you know, kind of suggests that it's for visually impaired people, it really isn't. And there's no reason that any of us couldn't benefit from using a service like this. All right, it's completely free. So please do recommend that to people. I think we've got this embedded into our web pages for our library content, and it gets thousands and thousands of hits a year, way beyond just the students with inclusive learning plans. So we know for sure that students without disabilities are finding it helpful. So Robo Braille is a really good shout for doing that accessible file conversion. Okay, so that's the first useful bit of technology. We mentioned about checking. So Blackboard Ally gave you that little speedometer icon, and then it sort of gave you some things that were going on in your document that you could fix. Well, Microsoft brilliantly embeds something called an accessibility checker into standard Microsoft Office. Okay, so again, if I just jump out of the PowerPoint and I'll go to a Word document that I've got here. So this is just the text version of the slides for this session. If I go to review, one of the inbuilt options that I have within Word is check accessibility. And if I go and look at that, you can see that what it's telling me is that I've got an issue where I've got an image in here, which actually, if you can just see at the top there, is the University of Kent logo, which I haven't added an alternative text description for. So that could be problematic to a visually impaired person. So I've got two options. I could say, well, actually, it's just decorative content, and I could mark it as decorative content, say it's not actually important, it's just a bit of cosmetic fluff. Or actually, that's really crucial to conveying the meaning of this document. So for example, if it was a graph of data, it would be really important that I represent that in a non-visual way. So to go and fix that, I would go into my header, and if I go to the picture settings, I've got an option for alt text, and this is where I would put University of Kent logo. And if it was a graph of data, I've got an option within this field here to go, you know, actually give a meaningful description. I wouldn't just say, you know, a graph of rainfall data for Kent. I would say rainfall data for Kent showing in January that there was 1,000 millimeters, and in February there was 1,200 millimeters. And you'd actually say, as if somebody was sat there with their eyes closed, and kind of describe what's going on in the image. But that's the field where you would then do that. If I now go and recheck my document under review, hopefully we'll see that thing about the alternative text description has now gone missing, and it's telling me that I need to double check the accessibility of a table within my document. Okay, but the great thing is it tells you how to fix these problems as you go along. All right, so that's everything that we're doing with Blackboard Ally, but you can do that with the ready-made tools that are built into Microsoft Word. So it's under review, and then it's check accessibility. We held a digital accessibility conference, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and Microsoft came along, and they were very pleased to announce some kind of emergent new technology that's again built into standard Microsoft Office packages, and it's this lovely thing now called Editor. Okay, so this, I consider this to be assistive technology. If anybody is familiar with something called Grammarly, which is I guess a bit like a sort of spell checking, grammar checking, plain English checking overlay that you can have for your desktop that you can apply to any documents that you're creating. This is a bit like the Microsoft Office version of Grammarly. So I've just run this Microsoft Editor over this document, and you can see it's given me a score of 94%. So it's doing some spelling stuff, so standard spelling checking as you would always have had. But what's particularly helpful here is it's doing acronym checking. So we mentioned one of the poor criteria under the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines was understandable, and it said there that we should be explaining what our acronyms are. So you can see here that I've not explained what WCAG means, but this is clever enough to pick out that actually WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and will allow me then to seamlessly go and add that. It adds all sorts of things around clarity, so plain English. So, you know, am I using a word that's a bit elaborate and a bit overblown, and could I use a more simple alternative? If you go through the various checks and eventually you get ticks for all of them, you should get 100%. But ultimately what it's giving you is you know, the readability of your document, how difficult it is to read, which will help you to better tailor content at particular audiences, you know. And of course, all of us would want all of our content to be as easy to read and understand as possible. So just like you would normally get to the end of a document and do a spell check, what we're proposing is that people get to the end of the document, do the editor check, which includes a spell check, do all of your standard grammar stuff, check for acronyms, and then you do your check accessibility stuff to make sure that it's, you know, you're baking in as much of the good accessibility stuff as possible. Then you save your document and you upload it to wherever you upload it to, or you email it to your staff and your students. But you know that it's not going to catch anyone out. Anyone with a visual impairment, for example, would be able to access it. Anyone with specific learning difficulties would be able to use the standard technology they use, and it would perform really well with those technologies. Okay, so, and of course it will be compliant with the regulations, and even a Word document that I've created and I'm now sharing with my team would be considered in scope for these regulations, because of course, remember, it's not just about your customers, it's about your staff as well. You know, the accessibility of staff with disabilities is equally important and equally covered by the scope of the regulations. Okay, also within Microsoft Office, if we go to the View tab, there's this lovely thing called Immersive Reader, which is a text-to-speech tool. Again, this is all baked in completely free into the standard Office 365 package that will allow you to have your documents read aloud to you and reformatted in all sorts of exciting ways. So I can take this slightly, you know, boring looking formatted Word document that we saw originally, and I can do all sorts of things to the text size. So if I fancy it having it a bit bigger, maybe I'm tired, it's the end of the day and I'm a bit tired and I've still got to do some reading, I could make it a bit easier on my eyes. I can do things with line spacing to make it easier to read. I can change my background colors. If I find, and a lot of students with things like Erlen syndrome may find that the, you know, a brighter background can create some of the conditions where the visual stress is worse. So we can take some of the heat out of the screen like that. If I'm perhaps not that confident in English, I could maybe show different parts of speech, you know. So here I'm highlighting, let's highlight all the verbs on the page. So you can see they're highlighted in red. So maybe particularly useful for somebody learning English. You know, that might be helpful to them. Further things I can do, I could go down to a little letterbox display like this, so that it allows me to really focus. This is particularly helpful for students who have tracking issues, and I think we all do this to some degree, where if you're faced with a big wodge of text on a page, your eye sometimes doesn't necessarily keep the tracking left to right, top to bottom reading, and sometimes you'll sort of read slightly diagonally and, you know, sort of skim read a bit, whereas something like this kind of forces us to read every word. So if I've also got text to speech options, so I could have the speed of the voice and whether I want a male or female voice.
Accessibility and inclusive practices. The public sector bodies, websites, and mobile applications, Accessibility Regulations, 2018, requires that digital content is accessible to WCAG Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Okay,
so hopefully you could hear that. Really useful for anyone who has specific learning difficulties. Often they'll get given a bit of technology, either it's called Claro Read Pro, or they'll be given something called Text Help Read and Write Gold. They're very expensive bits of technology, but actually this is doing the lion's share of what they do. So it's a really lovely thing to be able to share, you know, particularly international students who may not always get the same disabled students allowance funding or as readily accessible in that way, or members of staff. You know, access to work is increasingly difficult to get and is very time consuming. So really lovely thing to be able to recommend, and because it's already built into the standard Office interface, it's a highly accessible and integrated thing. I use it personally. I have dyslexia, but I use it. I find it really helpful for proofreading my own documents. It's almost as good as asking a third party to read something. You know, when you own a document and you've read it 1,000 times, you sort of become a bit blind to some of its flaws. Whereas if you go through something like this, it's almost like rereading it afresh. You know, because you are reading every word and you're hearing it being read to you, so you can understand the flow of it much better. So that's something called immersive reader. So everything I've just shown you there, completely free and baked into the standard technology that most of your students and staff should already have access to. Okay, I'm just going to show you, I'm hopefully going to wow you now with some nice technology from Apple. I just need to go and share this video with you.
Ben, can you take your webcam off because it's visuals flashing?
Unmute. Hope you can hear me again now. So I think that was a really good example of those all of the things you saw there primarily are built into the standard mobile operating system on a iOS device, so Apple mobile devices, and unlock so many opportunities for so many people. So that's exactly the kind of prize that we're fighting for. I'm just going to show you one more video. If I can remember how to do it, sharing. Just to say, it doesn't all have to be really fancy and expensive to do some of this stuff. Okay, so that was one of our visually impaired students using a tactile map of the University of Kent campus to find their way. That was something we did with the School of Architecture. It was really cheap and easy to produce, but the impact of it is huge. So I just showed that as a range of examples. It doesn't all have to be fancy Apple kind of devices to make all of this happen. I know we're running a bit short on time, so I'll now try and show you. We'll just do a quick whiz through some other really useful and cool technologies that cover a wide range. But the key thing to say is that all of these, everything I've showed you, is available on kent.ac.uk/tools. All of these things are linked to on a site that we call Productivity Tools, and they're all categorized. So depending on the nature of the task that you want to achieve, whether it's help with reading, or you want the screen read aloud to you like we were doing with Immersive Reader, that's the text-to-speech stuff. All right, all of them are covered in here. So please help yourself. You don't have to be a University of Kent person to be able to get access to them, or indeed direct people to them. 99% of them are completely free and open source. Okay. Okay, so let's start actually with a University of Kent.
Ben, we can't see the presentation. Yeah. I don't know whether you've gone back to it, but we can still see the video.
Oh, rats! Sorry. Right. Let me. Oh, see, I forgot to do that, didn't I?
That's all right.
Stop. All right. Can you see the web now? Can you see Assignment Survival Kit?
No, afraid not.
Okay. In which case, I need to.
That's
Is that
it.
better?
Yeah.
That's it. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so this is Assignment Survival Kit, which is something that the Student Learning Advisory Service at the university make available. But again, there's no reason that anyone who's doing an assignment to a specific deadline couldn't find this of interest. Okay, so the first thing you do is you tell it that the type of thing that you're doing. So primarily that is essays, but if it's something in science or technology, then you might choose perhaps one of the others. But let's leave it at essay for now. It starts with today's date. Let's just say we've got to do something by the end of the month. All right, so reasonably tight turnaround time. I then tell it calculate my assignment schedule, and very simply what it does is it just tells me which elements of the research process I should try and achieve by which point in the remaining time that I have. And if, for example, that's doing a literature review or my note taking or something, there's guidance on how I complete the things that I'd need to complete to achieve that step by the agreed submission date. All right, so really simple thing, but really a really nice way to get people thinking about time management. Okay, so that was the assignment survival kit. Okay, let's do this next one, Mercury Reader. I'm just going to go to a slightly busy web page. Now, Mercury Reader is a really simple little thing, right? So I've just landed here on a standard BBC News web page, right? And there's quite a lot of noise in a way, quite a lot of distractions potentially, all right? So I've got all sorts of headings, Twitter, you know, social media buttons. I've got all this banner on the right-hand side that could kind of distract me from the task in hand, which is reading the article. So Mercury Reader is a lovely little plugin that lives inside Chrome. It's completely free, a little plugin that I've got in my Chrome browser. And as you can see, it's just allowed me to change the background colors. Maybe we'll go for the lighter theme. I can do a little bit with the color changes and the type of font, but hopefully what you can see is it stripped out all of the noise, all of the distraction from those pages, all of the, you know, the Twitter links and stuff. Actually, it's included in bright and small at the bottom, but they're not quite as prominent or distracting. So again, if I wanted to print this, clearly that would print much more neatly as well without wasting loads of ink on all of those banners and stuff like that. All right, so again, just a nice, easy way to get stuck into a document without all of that extra noise. Okay, so that one was Mercury Reader. My study bar, unfortunately, because I'm on a Mac, I can't actually demo it for you, but I can certainly explain what it does. Earlier on, when we were looking at Immersive Reader, we mentioned something called Claro Read or Text Help Read Write Gold. And these are like it's a little toolbar that lives on your desktop. And basically each one of these buttons, each one of these icons, so if I clicked on planning or reading, it would initiate the opening of a particular program that could help with any of those functions. All right, so again, this is a completely free resource, and I understand in a subsequent webinar, Melanie Thornley is going to go to town on my study bar, so that would be a good one to look out for if you're interested in that. But that includes speech recognition as well. All right, but so it's a really nice, completely free tool, and again, a very viable alternative to the otherwise very expensive disabled students allowance funded regulars such as Claro Read or Text Help Read Write Gold. We've looked at Immersive Reader. I'll show you something a bit different. So, I mean, this is still study related, but this one's called Noisely. Now, this again is about focus and retaining, you know, an appropriate environment in which to do conducive study. And literally all this is different moods and background noises and colors to instigate different types of approaches to study. So I think if I put productivity on, you can hear that I've got a kind of soundboard here where I can change different background environments to whatever I choose. So that one's little Tweety birds. But you can make your own background environment that might be helpful to, you know, stop your annoying siblings playing music in the room next door, you know. So if you put some noise cancelling headphones on and you find one of these background environment sounds that helps you, that can help you retain focus. You'll notice it's set to do a 25-minute timer. That's because it's using something called the Pomodoro method, which is an approach to kind of focused bursts of study that seems to indicate that your best concentration happens in those 25-minute bursts. So the best thing to do is to study for that time, then take a break, have a stretch, go for a quick walk, come back and do another burst. And that's much better than just, you know, burning the midnight oil and staring at a screen endlessly. You know, you're much more productive if you do that kind of thing. All right. So lots of examples of sites that do similar things to this, that kind of create that conducive background environment, but certainly a useful one. I know some of the councillors at Kent will actually just come into the office in the morning and put one of these kind of sweet background noises on that makes it just feel a bit more kind of friendly in the office when they're doing consultations. Right, I know time's tricky, but I really would love to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ben. And very quickly, I think we had a hand raised for a question. For the person that raised their hand, if they want to just pop the question in the comment box, I will make sure we ask it to them. If anyone's got any questions, because yeah, we are coming into the last 5 to 7 minutes. So any questions, please do ask now. Thank you. Don't know whether you want to just quickly carry on showing what you were showing, Ben, while we wait for those questions to come in.
Well, what I want to show people now is an app called Seeing AI. So can you now see my webcam? Can you see me on the webcam on my phone?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So this is a really lovely mobile application called Seeing AI. So seeing artificial intelligence. And in that Apple video we looked at earlier, I don't know if you remember, but there was a visually impaired man taking a picture of his son in a park, and that the camera was talking to him, telling him that there was somebody positioned in the shot because he couldn't see it, but it was helping him take the photo and do the composition. Well, this is a very similar thing to that, where it uses the camera on your mobile device, but it lets you then accomplish a range of kind of study-related tasks potentially. So I hope this works. I'm going to try and turn my sound up as much as I can. But what I'm going to try and do is to look at a page of text that I've got here, and hopefully my phone will start reading it to me if I hold it in the right way.
Say shy of the R. Document.
Okay, oh, hang on, let's try that again.
Short, top and right edges not vis. Z clover, wheat and thistle. R, W-I-Z. L clover, wheat and thistle. Clover, with its 3 leaves in a single plant. Clover is a symbol of the Trinity. Wheat, whether in single stalks or bound in a sheaf, has a number of interlocking meanings.
Okay, so sorry it was a bit wobbly there, but basically I was just holding my phone over this page of text that's about symbolism in churches. So it was talking about clover and wheat. All right, so it did actually read them quite accurately. The other thing that I could have done is I could use my phone to actually take a photograph of the page of text.
Hold study.
Right, and can you hear it?
Processing.
It's telling me when it's happy. And what it will do now is it will actually take it will optical character recognize that page of text, so that I could then have it read aloud to me, or I could then email it to myself, which is really helpful for, you know, like a student who's in a library and they don't want to borrow that book. They've already maxed out all of their loans in the library, but they just need that chapter. So they could use their phone as a kind of mobile scanning device, effectively. So can I get out of this? I want to show you the next function. Share text. Okay, so that's possible. Remember, this is a talking camera for visually impaired people. So the next function available to me, I don't know how good that is to see. There's a range of options at the bottom. There's a product one which will allow you to scan barcodes, and it will tell the visually impaired person what the barcode is reading. So if you were going through your cupboards, you could scan the barcode and it would say, you know, tin of spaghetti or whatever. It's got a few kind of party tricks as well. So I'll be brave and I'll try and do this one. But if I take a picture of myself.
One face near center, less than a meter away. Processing. 41-year-old man with black hair and a beard looking neutral.
Looking neutral. It's unerringly kind of accurate. And what I've found is if you look happy, if you smile, oh shut up, if you smile, it makes you look younger, apparently.
0 faces.
It will also do color perception, so and it will do handwriting as well. So if you
preview.
if you took a picture of a page of like a whiteboard that had some handwriting on it, or even a page of notes that your friend had taken, as long as they haven't got like doctor's handwriting, it will do a really good job of turning them into machine readable text again, which will save you having to laboriously type up your notes at the end of a session. Yeah, or indeed, you know, grab what was on the whiteboard at the end of the seminar, for example. I think we're running short.
We are. I'm just joining in. Yeah, there hasn't been a question from the hand raised, but there have been some comments to say how interesting and useful it has been. And I know certainly I've learned lots today, and there'll be certain things that I will be going on and having a look, particularly around the word review and the Robo Braille. And I'm sure that everybody has found it really useful to have an introduction to the different tools that are available. And I know there's so many more, and we could keep going all day. Thank you so much, Ben. That was really, really useful. And I don't know whether you want to just quickly put on this the slides with your contact details, because I know that you said you were very happy to be contacted. If anyone wants any further information or support with the accessibility guidelines or what they could be doing. I'm just having a look.
We do have a quick question, Joni.
Okay. Let me have a look. Bear with me. Thanks, Kat. Missed that one. It is... How do you add an add-in? Ben, do you understand? I don't know. How do you add an add-in? I don't know that makes sense to you. I'm afraid it doesn't to me, because of it might be a technology thing.
No, I'm not. No, what does it relate to?
Is that in particular to a specific one of the tools that was being referred to? I will see what happens. We still can't see your screen either, Ben, I'm afraid.
I'm showing it.
Oh, plugin, sorry. How do you add a plugin?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you still see my screen now? Can you see me browsing like I'm on the internet?
Yeah.
Right, so from that list of productivity tools, for example, if we go back to, I mean, I can just navigate to Mercury Reader, but the productivity tools will take you to them. Most of them will have a Google Chrome plugin. So you obviously need to be using Google Chrome as your browser. But when you come into the Google Chrome Web Store, you don't need to pay for any of these. But there'll be a button there that says Add to Chrome, and then all of the little plugins that I've added then appear up here in the top right hand corner. So Mercury Reader is that little one there, that little icon. So you just add them from the store in Chrome, but it's completely free to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that answers the question. Oh, I'm on echo again. If you can switch the video. Oh, it stopped. Brilliant. So that really, if Ben's contact details you'll be able to see on the screen, that leaves it for me to do is to say a huge thank you. That was really, really informative. As Ben mentioned, there is another webinar that Melanie is leading from the University of Greenwich. I put the link in earlier. And hopefully you will be able to access that. That is very much on my study bar, which includes mind mapping, speech to text, text to speech, etc. And the link was in the bar earlier. So if we haven't got any further questions, let me just do one last double check. No, that just leaves me to say thank you very much everyone for joining us today. We do hope you found it useful, and please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Ben for any further information regarding some of the things that were discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone's gone.
Yeah. We were all.
Everyone. Oh, well done, Ben. That was fantastic. And Joni, you were both brilliant.
Ben,
That's really, really
that
good.
was so interesting. Is Ben still there? Is he gone? He's gone!
Oh no.
He didn't know we wait until the end, do we? I'm going to phone him up and email him now. Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it?
It was brilliant. You know, it's if only we'd just known, if we'd had those when we were younger as well. Those things I could have learned.
Well,
Brilliant.
I think that's the kind of, I know you've got another meeting, so we'll have to go, and I'll phone Ben
That's
as
all
well,
right.
just to say, sorry, we were waiting and he was there and he must have just gone, oh, is that it then? I just go. So I will phone him. But I think just having that for people to look at as well, you know, again, not just today, but that should be seen by anyone that's working with young people.
Well, anyone in marketing as well, you know, I'm thinking the CXK website,
Yeah.
you know, who runs that, you know, and our My Trust one. It's not for people, it's all back office people as well, isn't it? Anything we produce, and it's so easy. That Microsoft bit, it's so easy. We've all got Microsoft.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
I can't thank you enough, Joni, for setting all this up for me. You know, you've made I had to do all these webinars, and you've made it so easy for me.
It's been a pleasure. It's really helped me to figure out what I'd like to focus on next year as well. So watch this space. We've got a meeting put in, haven't we? I'll let you go to your other meeting because I know you've got another one.
Okay, and please say a big thank you to Ben. I'll send him a quick email later.
Right. See you later.
All right. Thanks. Bye.